All right, so let's dive into some of these spooky stories you guys sent in. I think they're going to be perfect for today.
Yes, sounds good.
We asked you to share some, like, unexplained encounters you had during childhood. And so we're going to kind of unpack today why those types of memories, why they stick with us.
Yeah. You know what's interesting about these two stories that we're going to talk about today is just how powerful they still feel to the people, even years later.
Right.
Like, these weren't just fleeting nightmares or something like that.
Yeah.
These really left a mark on them.
Yeah, for sure. The first one's called The Haunted House.
Oh, okay.
And it starts innocently enough. The narrator describes this old house, you know, kind of a quaint house that during the day felt totally normal,
Right.
but at night it just had a different feeling.
Yeah. I think it's interesting how, like, a place can transform like that, you know?
Totally.
Especially in a kid's mind. Like,
right.
the house itself becomes a different entity in the dark.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
And then there's this constant tapping at the bedroom window.
Oh, no.
Like every night this would happen. And the narrator talks about how the woods outside the window just turned into this wall of blackness at night.
Yeah.
And every night the tapping would start. Can you imagine?
Oh, it's like the suspense is just building and building.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and of course, what did the parents say?
No, I'm sure they're like, you're just imagining things.
It's just a branch.
Yeah.
You're imagining things.
But when you're a kid, you don't have that experience, you know, to rationalize it.
You don't have the life experience to be like,
Exactly.
oh, yeah, it's probably just the wind or whatever.
Right, and that dismissal from the parents can actually make it worse,
Yeah.
you know, because then the kid feels like they're the only one experiencing this.
It's like gaslighting almost.
Exactly. Yeah, like
Yeah.
it creates this sense of isolation when they're like, am I going crazy?
Totally. So it all culminates with this terrifying face appearing at the window.
Oh, jeez.
The narrator describes it as having these hollow eyes and like a crooked grin.
That's creepy.
Yeah. And it obviously leaves a lasting impact because the narrator says they ended up moving to a different room to try to escape it.
Wow, that really shows you how intense it was.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't just like, oh, I got scared and then I went to sleep. Like,
Right.
this fundamentally disrupted their sense of safety.
Totally. Okay, so let's shift gears a little bit
Okay.
to our second story
All right.
called The Creepy Barn.
Ooh. I like this already.
Yeah, this one takes place on the narrator's grandparents' farm,
Yeah.
which, you know, already you've got that rural setting.
Yeah, you know, there's all that folklore and
Yeah.
mystery already baked in.
Totally. And this story totally taps into all that.
Okay.
So there's this ominous old barn that everyone avoids
Uh-huh.
because of a local legend about a missing child.
Oh, wow. So you already have this layer of fear, like, built in
Totally.
before the story even starts,
Yeah.
just from the setting.
So our narrator, Jake, decides to explore this forbidden barn.
Jake, what are you doing?
I know.
Classic kid, though, right?
I know.
Like, you know, you shouldn't, but you gotta do it.
Curiosity gets the best of them.
Exactly.
And the story does such a good job of capturing the atmosphere inside this barn.
Okay.
Like the coldness, the dust, the smell of decay.
Yeah.
Like you can practically feel the weight of its history and the sense of something unseen lurking within.
It's all about those sensory details.
Right.
That's what really brings it to life.
It's so well written.
Yeah.
And then he hears it, sinister laughter echoing through the barn.
Oh, no.
I know. And it's not like the playful kind,
Yeah.
like this is genuinely unsettling.
Oh, that sends shivers down my spine.
I know, me too. And that's when the real fear kicks in for Jake.
Of course.
It's like the sound is what really gets you.
Right. Our sense of hearing is so primal.
Yeah.
So when we hear something we can't explain,
Yeah.
it really taps into our deepest fears.
Totally. And as if the laughter wasn't enough,
Oh, there's more.
Jake catches a glimpse of a fleeting shadow.
What?
I know. He doesn't see a clear figure. But just that brief moment of movement is enough to send him running.
That's the power of suggestion right there.
Yeah.
You've got the story of the missing child,
Mhm.
the creepy atmosphere of the barn, and then the laughter.
Yeah.
So he's already primed, and then boom, a shadow.
And that's all it takes.
Exactly.
And of course, this experience sticks with him.
I bet.
Jake avoids abandoned places for the rest of his life.
Wow. So it really had a lasting impact.
Oh yeah, it becomes a defining moment for him, shaping his perceptions and anxieties.
That's so interesting how one childhood encounter can have that kind of ripple effect.
Yeah,
It's a reminder that these experiences become part of our personal narrative.
totally. So we've got these two chilling stories, both rooted in childhood.
Right.
But what I find fascinating is neither story relies on anything overtly supernatural.
Yeah, you're right.
It's the atmosphere, the suggestion, the unknown that creates the real terror.
That's what makes them so relatable.
Hmm.
We've all felt that unease in a dark room or that feeling of being watched. Yeah,
These stories tap into those primal fears we all have.
totally. Okay, so we've set the stage with these two incredibly vivid accounts.
Yeah.
Now let's try to figure out what makes these kinds of childhood encounters so powerful
Okay.
and why they continue to haunt us even as adults.
Well, I think a big part of it is how kids experience the world.
Okay,
Their senses are heightened, their imaginations are more fluid,
yeah.
and they haven't developed the same filters and rationalizations that adults use.
So they're just much more open to experiencing things in a way that adults might dismiss or explain away.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that makes them super susceptible to suggestion.
Yeah.
Like a story, a rumor, even a glimpse of something unexplained
Mm-hmm.
can take root in their minds and become something much bigger and scarier.
So in a way, their fears are almost self-fulfilling prophecies.
It's a really interesting interplay between perception, belief, and imagination.
Yeah,
And because these experiences happen during such a formative time,
right.
they can have a lasting impact. It's like those early encounters really shape their worldview,
Exactly.
influencing their anxieties, their
Yeah.
comfort zones, even their belief system.
It's like a lens through which they see the world.
Right. And even as we grow older and become more rational,
Yeah,
those early impressions can still linger in our subconscious.
they become part of our emotional landscape.
So even if we know logically that the monster under the bed wasn't real, the fear it instilled in us can still manifest in other ways.
Exactly, like a fear of the dark or a heightened sense of vulnerability.
It's so interesting. So I think what we're getting at is it's important to acknowledge the power of these early experiences,
Absolutely.
even if we can't fully explain them.
They remind us that our understanding of the world is constantly evolving.
Yeah.
And sometimes the most profound lessons are learned in the shadows of our own childhood fears.
Very well said. I love that. Yeah, it's like those early experiences. They really do kind of shape the way we see the world, even as adults.
Totally. Like they're these little explorers going out into the unknown. And the things that scare them along the way, those really shape the map they use to navigate the world as they grow up.
So if these experiences are so strong, how do we like reconcile them with our adult understanding of the world? Like, do we just say, oh, that was just my childhood imagination?
I think it's more complicated than, our brains are always filtering and interpreting information.
Yeah.
And that process changes depending on how old we are,
Right
what
on.
we believe, and what we've been through.
So like that tapping on the window,
Yeah.
maybe it really was just a branch.
Exactly.
But because the kid is, they just haven't lived as long.
Right.
They don't have the context to understand that.
Exactly. And they're also more afraid in general.
Right.
So that branch becomes something way scarier.
So it doesn't mean that their experience wasn't real.
Right.
It's just that they were processing it differently.
Exactly.
So how do we figure out what really happened in these stories? Is there any way to know what's real and what's not?
That's the tough part. With these personal stories, we have to be careful about imposing our own interpretations or trying to fit them into these neat little categories of real or imagined.
It's like we're trying to solve a mystery,
Yeah.
but we're missing half the pieces.
Right. We might never have the full picture.
Okay, so what's the point then? If we can't figure out the answer, what can we learn from these stories?
I don't think the point is always to find a definitive answer.
Okay.
It's more about understanding the impact these experiences had
Right.
and what they teach us about perception and memory and the power of belief.
So what are some key takeaways for you? Like if someone's listening to this, what can they learn from these stories?
I think one big takeaway is how important it is to validate childhood experiences.
Uh-huh.
Even if as an adult we think it sounds fantastical or whatever,
Yeah.
it was real to that child.
Right.
And it shaped who they became.
So it's like we have to respect those early perceptions.
Exactly, even if we see things differently now.
Well, no-
Well, another important point is that our perceptions are constantly evolving.
Okay.
Like, what we believe to be true can change over time.
As we get older.
Exactly as we get older, as we have new experiences.
So we might have thought something supernatural happened when we were a kid, and then later on we look back and we're like, maybe not.
Right, and that's totally fine.
Yeah.
It's all part of understanding ourselves and the world around us.
This has been a really fascinating discussion.
Yeah, it has.
We've talked about the line between childhood imagination and reality, the power of suggestion, and how these unexplained events can stick with us.
We've also talked about how our perceptions change over time.
Right.
And how important it is to respect personal experiences.
Even if we don't totally understand them.
Exactly.
You know, listening to you talk about all this stuff, I was just thinking about this time when I was a kid,
Oh, yeah.
like 8 years old.
What happened?
It wasn't anything like super dramatic,
Okay.
like not a face at the window or anything, but we had this old swing set in our backyard.
Oh, yeah.
Those metal ones
Uh-huh.
with the chip paint and everything.
Oh, yeah, I remember those. You always felt like you were going to get tetanus just from, like, touching it.
Right. So there was just something about swinging on that thing at dusk that always kind of freaked me out.
Really?
Yeah. Like the way the shadows would get all long
Yeah.
and the wind would feel colder as the sun went down.
It is interesting how certain times of day can have, like, a different energy.
Yeah.
Especially for kids.
Totally.
Yeah.
And it was never during the day. It was always right at that, like, twilight time.
Yeah, Twilight's definitely a spooky time.
Yeah. It's like all your senses are heightened. So I would just get this overwhelming feeling
Okay.
that I was being watched from the woods.
Oh, no.
I know. Like the woods were at the edge of our yard, and I never saw anything.
Okay.
But the feeling was so real.
That's so creepy. The feeling of being watched, like unseen eyes on you.
It's like primal. Like something deep inside you is like danger.
Right. Like it's an instinct.
So of course I'm like 8 years old. So my imagination just goes wild.
Oh, yeah.
I'm convinced there's like creatures hiding in the woods,
Right.
waiting to like grab me off the swing or something.
It's amazing how our minds fill in the blanks like that
I know.
when we're faced with something we don't understand.
Yeah, we just come up with these stories.
And usually those stories are scary.
Especially when you're a kid.
Yeah.
So looking back now,
Yeah.
it was probably just the, the fading light and the wind and the leaves rustling and my own imagination.
But at the time, it felt completely real.
Oh, totally.
And that's what matters.
Right.
The power of that belief.
Yeah,
Whether there was actually something in the woods or not,
right.
the fear you felt was real.
Yeah, and it totally changed how I felt about that swing set.
Oh, I bet.
I never wanted to swing at dusk again.
Makes sense.
But it's funny because it also made me more aware,
Oh,
like more sensitive to my surroundings,
huh.
which I guess is a good thing.
Yeah, I think that's what's so fascinating about these childhood encounters.
Yeah,
They might not always make sense,
right.
but they can really change how we experience the world.
So I think that's a good place to wrap up.
Yeah.
The big takeaway here is that these childhood fears, they're not just silly little things.
Right.
They're actually really important.
They shape who we become.
Right. So let's try to understand them instead of just dismissing them,
Exactly.
because they tell us a lot about ourselves.
And how we see the world.
So whether it's a haunted house or a creepy barn or a swing set at dusk,
You're right.
these stories remind us that the world is full of mystery.
And that sometimes the most important truths are hidden in our own memories.
I love that. Well, this has been such a great conversation.
Yeah, it has.
We hope you enjoyed this deep dive, and we'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your own childhood encounters with us on social media or wherever you listen.
We'll keep the conversation going.
Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep exploring
Keep questioning.
and keep the wonder alive.